post-apocalyptic literature, TVs, movies, they've been very popular lately. Not sure why. But it's hard to find a copy of The Handmaid's Tale in bookstores today. And if you saw the series, it was amazing, and the people at the Emmys the other day thought it was amazing too. Post-apocalyptic literature, this type of art, is often very critical of religion. It works because we can definitely imagine, quote, religious people doing the things that we read about or we saw in The Handmaid's Tale. Religion in these stories is not necessarily, or is not, a bulwark against violence, terror, and oppression. And maybe that's true about religion. We just have to read the paper today to know that. This summer, I read another post-apocalyptic classic that paints a very different picture of religion. In A Canticle for Leibowitz, first written in serial form in the late 50s, there's a devastating nuclear war in the distant past, and the world is now in a dark age. In most of the book, a small desert monastery is preserving scientific knowledge. They don't quite understand it, but they're preserving the works. They are also keeping moral knowledge alive. While wars and tribalisms happening all around them, they're living upstanding lives. The monastery then becomes a foundation and a spark of what, again, will become civilization. Religion is the preserver of truth in a time of violence and deprivation in this work. In A Canticle for Leibowitz, this religion is Catholicism, although the book does engage a little bit with Judaism. And this got me thinking about today. God willing, our leaders will be wise and prudent so that there will not be some nuclear devastation. But in our pluralistic time, what is religion preserving and teaching society? What is all religion teaching? We're all in this together, I think. And then I was thinking a little bit, what are other religions teaching us specifically, we Jews? So I want to focus tonight on what I think we can learn from Christianity and Islam. And I picked these because these are the two religions that the Jewish world has the most historical contact and engagement with. And then I want to explore what I think Judaism might teach the world. One word at the outset, rabbis from the Middle Ages have been debating what the Jewish view of Christianity and Islam should be, because if it's decided that these two religions are idolatry, there are a bunch of biblical prohibitions that would then have to be enacted, which dealing with idolaters. We couldn't talk to our neighbors if they were decided to be idolatry. So for the most part, since the Middle Ages, it has been decided that Christianity and Islam are monotheism. Now, that's Islam especially, more on that later. And also many medieval scholars say Christianity has done a great service to the world in spreading our words, the Bible, even though they have a sequel. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg writes, the medieval sage Maimonides makes clear that whatever erroneous doctrines Christianity or Islam may teach does not undercut their fundamental contribution to, quote from Maimonides, to prepare the world to worship God with one accord. In various ways, Jews have always engaged in the ideas of these two religions, often in refutation. But tonight I don't want to refute them. What I want to do is pick out one thing from each tradition that can enhance our understanding of Judaism, enhance our practice of Judaism. And what I'm not going to do is say all religions are the same and can't we all get along? There are important differences. But what I want to show is that there are important similarities, and that concepts in another religion can help us think about ours so that we can live Jewish lives of meaning in conversation with others. So let's start with Christianity. We can learn a lot from Christianity. Christians speak of love and universalism and salvation and God's grace. These are concepts that sometimes in modern Judaism we don't like to talk about because they sound Christian, but if you open up your Siddur or the Machzor tonight, you'll see Ahava, love, Yeshua, salvation, Chen v'chesed, grace. So I want to pick a concept that you might think can't be Judaized. Incarnation. Classical Christianity believes that God literally made himself, and I'm saying him on purpose here, made himself human in the form of this real human named Jesus of Nazareth. And don't worry. I'm not here to say that we should believe that. You can kick me off the beamer right away if I did say that. They should take back my rabbinic ordination. But what I want to explore is what incarnation could mean in a Jewish context, because I think it can teach us something very meaningful. Back to Gitz Greenberg. Obviously, many Jews will argue that closing the biblically portrayed gap between the human and the divine, between the real and the ideal by incarnation is idolatrous, or at least against the grain of the biblical way. But even if incarnation is contradictory to some biblical principles, the model itself is operating out of classical biblical modes. These modes are the need to achieve redemption, the desire to close the gap between the human and the divine. Greenberg continues that Jews can take from the Christian idea of God's incarnation in Jesus the very Jewish notion that God needs human emissaries on earth to live out the covenant and bring the world closer to redemption. The late Jewish thinker Michael Wishograd even argues in his work, The Body of Faith, God in the Jewish People, that for the Torah, God is incarnate in the whole Jewish people. Christians believe in one incarnation, and according to Wishograd, God is in all of us, all of the Jews. He writes, the Christian proclamation that God became flesh in the person of Jesus of Nazareth is but a development of the basic thrust of the Hebrew Bible, God's movement towards humankind. At least in this respect, the difference between Judaism and Christianity is one of degree rather than kind. This biblical God is not a philosophical abstract, but a real being in whom one can have a relationship. If we read through the Hebrew Bible, God often takes on human form, called a malach. We like to say it's an angel and think about something with wings, but for our biblical ancestors, they took this literally in many stories. We'll read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, tomorrow on Rosh Hashanah, Abraham and the visitors. The 70 elders see this vision of God in a body. Samson's parents meet a person who turns out to be God. And right at the beginning, we are told that we are created in the image of God. I think our ancestors took this literally, and I think that we can take it very seriously. When we look into the face of another, our loved ones, the homeless person at the corner of Eglinton and the Allen, a person in a foreign country, we are looking at the face of God. If you want to say, God incarnate. When we know that we know that we are obligated to that person. I think another important lesson from this way of looking at incarnation is that our bodies are primary. There is no such thing as a disembodied Jewish soul. Judaism is a religion of ensouled bodies with embodied souls. Or as the contemporary teacher Alan Marinis teaches, you don't have a soul, you are a soul. The biblical scholar Benjamin Summer writes, one can imagine a Platonic study circle populated by philosophers who have a mind but no body, or a church full of certain kinds of Protestants who have only a soul. But that doesn't make sense in Judaism. There could be no such Beit Midrash, a house of study, or Beit Knesset, a synagogue. It makes sense that the traditional Jewish belief in an afterlife involves not just immortality of the soul, but resurrection of the body. If we only have souls in the future, then we will no longer have Torah. For one learns Torah with one's mouth and throat, and one lives Torah with one's forehead, arms, shoulders, hopefully tonight, our stomachs too. We as Jews sanctify our bodily processes. The traditional blessing after, relieving oneself says, "Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who formed humanity in wisdom and created us with many orifices and cavities. It is revealed and known before the throne of your glory that were one of them to be ruptured or blocked, it would be impossible to survive and stand before you. Blessed are you, healer of all flesh, who does wondrous deeds." Also, the traditional wording of the morning blessing, thanking God for our soul, our embodied soul, is very incarnational. My God, the soul you placed within me is pure. You created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me, and you guard it while it is within me. One day you will take it from me and restore it to me in the time to come. As long as the soul is within me, I will thank you, Adonai, my God and God of my ancestors, master of all works, Lord of all souls. Blessed are you, who restores souls to dead bodies. God is here with us, works through our bodies. I think there's a beautiful way of thinking of God, entering into a relationship with God and living a life of holiness. But it might be taken too far. If God is incarnate in us, if God is in us, who is to say that I'm not God? And if I am God, who is to say that I can't do whatever I want to do? It might turn into a theology of narcissism. And so let's move on to Islam. Most forms of Islam, except maybe some forms of Sufi mysticism, see God as totally separate. God has no image whatsoever. A mosque would not have stained glass windows like ours, even though ours don't represent a picture of God. A basic creedal statement of Islamic theology in the Quran says, "Say, it is God, the One. God is eternal, neither giving birth nor having been born. Nothing is comparable to him." God is totally separate. Scholar of Islam and Reform Rabbi Reuven Firestone writes, "Nowhere does the Quran suggest that humanity was created in the image of God. God has no image. God is totally ineffable." As I see it, this ineffability leads the individual to humility. Humility because of wonder and awe. Harun Mogul, in his wonderful new memoir, a meditation on what it means to be a contemporary American Muslim called How to Be a Muslim, an American Story, says this: "A believer is one who is thankful." In Arabic, this is shakir. They're thankful in awe at the privilege of existence. We are privileged to be alive. And it is not because of my merit that I am alive. That is humility. You can see this, I've seen it, in the way a Muslim prays. Prostration, in unison with others. Here in Toronto, people of all colors and ethnic groups all doing it together. If you've ever seen videos of people in the Hajj in Mecca, see all kinds of people from all over the world in unison. In fact, Avraham ben Harambam, the medieval rabbi in Egypt, son of Maimonides, said that Jews should pray this way too, in lines together, down on the floor. He even believed that the Muslims were teaching us the original ways Jews prayed. He was, of course, overruled. Many of us have experienced Muslims doing their humble, submissive prayer here at Holy Blossom, just recently at Shavuot, when we had a joint Shavuot and Ramadan evening. Teaches humility, that we're separate from God. And because we're separate from God, we can say, I'll say me, myself, I am not the center of the universe. God is, and I was created. Mogul writes, if the world was created from nothing, and it was, then it is created in distance from God. We are not him, we cannot be him. We must be ourselves, our lonely, terrified, mortal selves. Individuality demands alienation. God, many a Muslim will say, created the world so that he may be known. Our job is to know God and have that reflected in the way we live. Humility helps us view the world realistically. The whole world is not about us. We are a part of the community of humanity. We, individually, are not the center. This is a very important lesson at this season of reflection and repentance, the season of Teshuvah. For us to ask forgiveness, for us to right our wrongs, we need to realize that it is not all about me, me, me. For us to forgive, we need to realize that it is not all about me, me, me. Humility is needed to repair relationships, families, and communities. As we pray every day in the morning service, many of our works are vain and our days pass away like a shadow. Since all our achievements are insubstantial as mist, how dare we look upon ourselves as higher than the beasts? Yet despite all our frailty, we are your people, bound to your covenant and called to your service. We therefore thank and praise you and proclaim the holiness of your name. Ashrenu ma tov chelkenu, ma na'im goralenu, ma yafa yerushatenu. How fortunate we are. How good is our portion, how pleasant our destiny, how beautiful our inheritance. Now you might have noticed that the big ideas that I brought from Christianity and Islam are also found in Judaism. So what can Judaism teach to the world? Well, I think one thing that's important today is pluralism. Our ancient sage, Rabbi Yehoshua, proclaimed that all righteous people have a place in the world to come, not just Jews. And to be righteous, according to our sages, one had to follow pretty common rules of morality derived from the story of Noah. The 14th century sage in Provence, Menachem Me'eri, says that Muslims and Christians are people bound by religion, which removes their religion from the category of idolatry and places them fully within the universe of moral obligation of Jews. And in a Western world where the proportion of religious believers is getting smaller and smaller, I would include to the statement moral secular humanists. All righteous people have a place in the world to come. Now, many liberal Christians no longer believe that one has to accept Jesus to be, quote, saved. And I think classically in Islam, Jews and Christians were not technically infidels. And yet, Islam and Christianity historically saw their religions as the only truth. Judaism, though, for many sages and in many ages, did not. It's just for the Jews. In our age, which might be compared to the convivencia, the maybe idealized time in medieval Spain when Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived together, our age here in Canada especially, I think it is our mission, as our classical reformers would say, the mission of Israel, to teach how we can learn from everyone, how our ideas can be part of the marketplace of ideas, and how we can still have our own identity, our own practices, our own story. Jews have what to teach. Shabbat, taking a day off from technology, from the world. We have what to teach about being a minority in a world of multiple identities. We have what to teach about being a people and a religion, about being obligated in the presence of the other, in the presence of the capital O, other. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg again, this new analysis must include an understanding of God's pluralism, that no religion has a monopoly on God's love. The covenant of Noah between God and all humanity lives. Faiths articulate and extend its mandate, but in so doing, they do not have an exclusive divine mission that renders other religions irrelevant. On the contrary, they need the help of other religions to accomplish tikkun olam, of repairing the world, and they can instruct and enrich the others along the way. Friend of Holy Blossom, Yossi Klein Halevi, in his book, At the Entrance to the Garden of Eden, A Jew's Search for Hope with Christians and Muslims in the Holy Land, writes, and this is a book about exploring the other faiths, the one enduring transformation that I carry with me from this journey is that I learn to venerate, to love Christianity and Islam. I learn to feel at home in a church and in a mosque. The cross and the minaret have become for me cherished symbols of God's presence, reminders that God speaks to us in multiple languages, that God speaks to us all. I want my children to understand that even as this land showed its hardest face, we can still receive inspiration from another's tradition's experience of God's presence. May God's presence in us incarnate in us, and God's presence in the heavens, that transcendent God, open our hearts to learn and to teach, to listen and learn from each other and from the other, and to teach the world to do the same. Shana Tova.